Good morning, friends, and hello everyone. Welcome back to our channel. Today, we will be continuing on our safety awareness series, which has been designed to create a safety awareness among the people working in various industries, and also when we move around our environment, if we see any unsafe condition, we would be able to point it out. So, in our first episode, we talked about working at heights, one of the most common workplace hazards. Today, we will be moving to another critical area of workplace safety, that is, working in confined space. Confined space might look harmless at first glance, but they can become extremely dangerous if not handled properly. Many serious workplace accidents have happened simply because people underestimated the risk inside a confined space. So, in next few minutes, we will try to understand what a confined space is and what are the hazards involved and how we should identify them and what are the factors we should consider while assessing the risk of working in a confined space. So, with this, let's start this video. Now, first, let us define what we mean by a confined space. A confined space, as a definition given by OSHA, that is Occupational Safety Hazard Agency, says that a space large enough for an employee or a worker to bodily enter and perform the work. But one thing to note is that this space has a limited or a restricted means for entry or exit. At the same time, the space is not designed for a continuous human occupancy. So, in short, a space which is been designed not to be manned on a continuous basis, and at the same time, this to enter into this space, the openings are there, but they are restricted or they are limited. So that space will be considered a confined space. Now, let us understand through examples what do we mean by what are the examples of this confined space. Tanks, vessels, silos, manholes, the sewers, the pits, the pipeline, the ductwork, the crawl spaces, and attics, and the boilers. Uh, Certain people tend to argue why a boiler is considered a confined space, though the boiler has sufficient oxygen, but at the same time, this space has limited entry and exit, and also this space is not designed for continuous human occupancy. Therefore, the boiler will be considered a confined space. Now we will talk about what are the various confined space hazards. To define the hazards or to understand the hazards, we have divided the hazard into three parts: the atmospheric hazards, the physical hazards, and the biological hazards associated with a confined space. One by one, we will be discussing all the three types of hazards. Oxygen deficiency, the first in the category of atmospheric hazard. This is because the air inside the confined space may not have enough oxygen for safe breathing. This can happen due to rusting, chemical reaction, or simply because the space is sealed. One more condition in which this oxygen deficiency may prevail if there is lack of proper ventilation inside a confined space. Initially, when a person enters into the confined space, they observe that the oxygen is more than the minimum oxygen required, that is 19.5%, and therefore they tell it's safe to work. But when they start working, they consume the oxygen, and because of the improper ventilation, the fresh air which is entering into the confined space may not have sufficient oxygen, and with time they feel dizziness because of the lack of oxygen. So one should always monitor the oxygen level while they are working in a confined space. Secondly, the combustion and the flammable materials which are present inside the workplace. In the confined space. In some cases, gases or vapor inside the confined space may catch fire. As you all know that the gases and vapor have their flash point and fire point at room temperature, and if you do cutting also, welding also inside a confined space, then in that condition the gases or vapors may get the sufficient temperature and start burning, and this will lead to burn injuries. Sorry, in certain cases this may lead to a burn injuries for the people who are working inside the confined space. Similarly, the toxic atmosphere, the gases like hydrogen sulfide, carbon monoxide, or the vapors from the chemicals may accumulate inside. This can also cause a dizziness, unconsciousness, or even death. This point is more noticeable in the case of people who are working in sewers. Normally, when you open the sewer manhole cover, the gases start coming out, and people in the vicinity, if they doesn't move out at that point of time, before entering into the confined space, they may get dizziness, or they even in certain cases it may a fatal may also have happened because of these toxic atmosphere. So let us before start working in a confined space, if there are toxic materials, let these toxic materials purged out, and then only one should start. Now we will talk about the physical hazards. In physical hazards, in physical hazards, we talk about the physical characteristic of working in a confined space. Normally, a confined space is observed as a tight space which may have moving machinery, electrical hazards, heat, stress, or there is a risk of engulfment by loose material like sand or grain. Similarly, there is a risk of drowning because these confined spaces may have some liquid, and the people may get drowned inside it, or if there is some failure of isolation happen, in that case some liquid or chemicals will enter into the confined space and people may get drowned. Similarly, there is a risk of fall from the height. In certain confined spaces, people tend to enter into the confined space through openings from roof with the help of safety rope, and this since this safety rope has limited movement, so there are chances that while working inside a confined space at height level, the rope may get broke, or because of the improper movement of the free movement of the rope, the people may get fall down. Similarly, one more risk which is of physical nature in a confined space is the poor visibility. The inadequate lighting increases the chance of accidents. Uh, the main thing to notice is here is that the confined space is characterized as the restricted access, and this restricted access actually hinder the rescue efforts which are required to save the person in case of emergencies. The the next hazard or category of hazard which we will talk about is the biological hazards. Since this confined space doesn't have the proper ventilation, so there are always the increased chances of seeing algae, molds, viruses, bacteria in the confined space, and these biological organisms may hamper the health of the people who are working inside the confined space. So these are the hazards which need to be considered while working in a confined space. Now we will consider the factors which need to be looked upon while assessing the risk of working in a confined space. The first thing is that the entry or the exit arrangements, means the way to enter and exit in confined space, what atmosphere to be encountered inside the confined space, and how we are testing the atmosphere, whether we are just testing the atmosphere for oxygen, whether we are testing the atmosphere for flammable materials, means, and how at what frequent interval we should carry out this testing. The next thing is the task which need to be done in a confined space, whether we have to do welding, painting, grinding, etc. What materials and equipments are being used while working in a confined space, whether these equipment themselves carry the increased chances of electrical shock or other bodily injuries, what isolation need to be carried out while working in a inside a confined space, and number of people at risk, and the most important is the reliability of the safeguards which has been done in preventing the failure of any isolation. Thank you for watching this episode of our safety awareness series. I know we have just touched upon the hazards, and what left in this topic is what are the safe operating practices that need to be done or need to be taken care while working in a confined space, and I would be making another video on this very soon. So if you find this video useful, please like, share and subscribe to my channel so that we can spread awareness and build a strong safety culture together. Till then, stay safe and I will see you in my next video.